High-speed police chases and wanton and reckless driving on the part of police kill hundreds of people, including law enforcement officials, alleged criminals, as well as innocent civilians every year in the United States. While authorities are engaged in high-speed police chases or pursuits, there can be complete disregard for the safety of other drivers as officers continue the chase well after the danger outweighs the need to apprehend the suspect. More people in the United States are killed by high-speed pursuits and wanton and reckless driving by the police than they are by police firearms. And yet these wrongful deaths from car accidents will likely continue year after year. That is why 2/3 of those injured or killed in fatal car accidents stemming from police chases or pursuits are innocent drivers and pedestrians that have nothing to do with the chase. In this insider exclusive investigative special, we go behind the headlines in Justice in America, Hailey Allard's story, to meet with Claudine Cloutier, partner at the Ketch's law firm, and Carrie Ann Estrella, her client. As we take you inside today's legal system, examining Claudine's strategies and her client's thoughts, and in vivid detail, showing you the often heartbreaking stories of cases like the tragic death of Carrie Ann's 21-year-old daughter, Hailey, for whom Claudine successfully got justice for the family. Here's Hailey's mother, Carrie Ann, speaking about her daughter.
My daughter Hailey was an outstanding, beautiful individual who would have done a lot of good in this world. She was a nursing student. She was heading for pediatrics, where she loved kids, and I think she would have been a great asset to this world and to kids all over the place that she would have cared for. What I loved most about her was her drive and her, she was never afraid. She was a gentle, kind soul, but she was spunky. She was a spitfire. You never had to guess what she was feeling. She was an absolutely amazing young lady. And she knew how to stand up for herself, I'll tell you that much. What I miss about her the most is everything, is her presence. Even our bad times when, teenagers and mothers, sometimes they clash, and we clashed. I'm who I am because of her. She made me be this person by giving me the strength and the drive. I wanted to be a good role model for my daughter. I was a young parent, I was 18, and I was like, I wanted the best for her. So the more I did, the more I showed her that, look, women can do, I had a baby young, but look, I went to school, I conquered, we built a house, and she was going on all the right paths. And I was eager to see that transpire in her life. We actually were gonna graduate at the same time. She would have graduated with her RN, and I would have graduated with my doctorate degree in nursing from the same school. So this past year has been it's always been hard, but this was a hard year simply because of the fact that I had all these dreams and hopes of what was going to be once she graduated, once I graduated, the next step, next chapter of her life, the next chapter of mine, and it just doesn't matter anymore. I mean, it does, but it doesn't, because I'm not sharing that with her. I think Claudine did the best she could legally. In the state of Massachusetts, there are certain, you can only go a certain, as far as you can go. And she went above and beyond that, trying to do the best she could for me, physically, emotionally, and just trying to make things right to the best of her ability. I would absolutely recommend Claudine to others. She wasn't only my attorney, but she also felt like family, that there was a great bond and trust between Claudine and myself. Here is what I have to say to reckless drivers and cops. There are innocent people on the road who have families, mothers, fathers, sisters, aunts, bright futures. You've got to think about them as well as yourself. By driving reckless, we're putting not only them at danger, but ourselves.
These victims could be you or me one day, and if you are so unlucky, you will quickly find that justice in America is a hard-won battle where very few defendants ever do the right thing, and you need experienced and passionate trial lawyers like Claudine Cloutier, partner at the Ketch's Law Group, who wage these battles with their own financial resources to get their clients justice. This is the Insider Exclusive, live from Boston, Massachusetts. It is my great pleasure to introduce Claudine Cloutier. Welcome to the show, Claudine.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Tell our audience a little bit about your law group, the Catches Law Group. What type of law do you practice here?
We do all plaintiffs or employee-based personal injury, workers' compensation, medical malpractice.
Representing a lot of the little people in the world, correct?
We do. Anybody can get hurt, so it runs a spectrum. But given the type of practice that we have, particularly on the workers' compensation side, a lot of the folks that have physically demanding jobs, a lot of construction workers, those kinds of folks tend to be the ones that have major work injuries, and so we represent those folks, and some of those have personal injury cases or negligence-based cases in addition to the workers' compensation case. And then we also do, car accidents of any kind, products liability, wrongful death claims, slip and falls. It can be something that is fairly routine to catastrophic, complex injuries.
Right. There are many types of law a lawyer can go into. Why did you decide to practice this type of law?
Started working at this law firm when I was in law school, and I really didn't know what area I wanted to go into. And the more I practiced this, or the more I saw it practice as a law clerk then, the more I really enjoyed, and I found a sense of purpose in the difference you can make in someone's life who comes to you having suffered a terrible incident. And it was a nice sort of combination of the problem-solving analytical aspects that you think about when you think about going to law school, but then a real human side as to how to get folks the best result possible in light of usually some pretty terrible circumstances. And so in that regard, I was drawn to it, and I thought it was a nice combination for me.
Right. And today we're here talking about one particular case, which is unfortunately the death of Hailey Allard. Who was Hailey?
Hailey was just this beautiful light in the world. Often as a lawyer, you don't know somebody before something terrible has happened to them. In this case, I actually knew Hailey since she was a young kid, and was just a great kid. I know her family very well, and just a great, just bubbly personality, big personality, would light up the room, when she walked through the door. And when she was killed, it just tore everybody's hearts out. And so every case is personal, but this one truly was personal from the beginning because I knew her before I had to get to know her over the course of the case, and I knew her family. And so, obviously it was a difficult case to work, as any of these cases are, but particularly when you know the person involved, it's difficult.
Yeah. She was 20 years old when she passed.
She just turned 20, like 10 days before, yeah.
Yeah, tell our audience what happened.
She was on her way home from hanging out with her boyfriend, and she was turning onto the street, essentially where she lived. She lived at the top of the street when police officers were responding to a potential vehicle break-in call traveling in the opposite direction. And as Hailey turned left, she was struck by one of the responding police officers.
And she died instantly, I understand.
Yes.
Okay. Now, in a case like this, there's a number of problems in trying to prove who's responsible. And when you prove who's responsible, then you have some other hurdles and challenges. Tell our audience a little bit about when a police car hits you, seriously injures or kills you. What are some of the challenges you face?
Well, obviously, when a police officer is responding to a call, what rules and what is reasonable is different from just normal, citizen travel or somebody driving in routine activities. Here, I could see immediately from just having handled other crashes when I went to the scene, and by the markings that were on the road, I could see that the initial impact occurred on the officer's side of the road, and I knew that with Hailey turning left, the officer would have the right of way. And so the question in my mind immediately was, what happened to cause this? Why would she not wait the extra split second instead of, turning left at that time? And, as we developed more information in the case, some of the possibilities came to light. You can never have a 100% certainty, particularly when, we're missing obviously a critical witness and we don't have Hailey to tell us what happened that night. But with some of the facts that we were able to gather, we had a pretty good idea of what likely happened.
Yeah, you hired, I think, a state investigator, a former state investigator, right?
There's two people. We had a private investigator that interviewed some of the witnesses along the streets that saw, what was going on with the police response up until the time of impact. And we also hired a former state police officer, state police trooper, who did an accident reconstruction for us and downloaded some of the black box data from the police vehicle, so we had an idea of what the speeds were involved leading up to the crash.
So what was the difference between what the police officer said happened that killed Hailey and what really happened?
That I can't answer. We never got to the point where I took the police officer's deposition. So I don't know what the police officer's version of events are. I've never met him. I'm sure that this weighs heavily on him as well. But from our investigation, we didn't want to sit back and wait to see what the police investigation revealed. Obviously, when there's an officer-involved crash, you want to get as much information as you can, as early on as you can, in the town where you're potentially suing the police department of that town. You're not really sure whose allegiances will lie there and who's going to give you an objective voice. But when something this tragic happens, obviously, the sooner you talk to people, the more objective usually you get in terms of evidence and observations, and that's what we did. We sort of got on top of it right away and tried to get the information as early as we can. And what emerged from both what the witnesses told us and what the black box data then subsequently demonstrated for us is that the officer, more than one officer, when the more vehicle was responding to essentially a low priority potential vehicle break-in call, traveling at speeds nearly twice the speed limit on that roadway, and the vehicle that was involved in the crash apparently did not have its blue lights activated either. So our working theory was that as Hailey approached the left turn, she probably misjudged how fast the vehicle was going and also may not have realized that it was an officer responding to a call, and took the left when really she definitely did not have time to make that left turn.
Right. And also the sirens were not on either.
There were no sirens on.
No lights, no sirens, right?
No blue lights on. There was another vehicle in front of that officer that we understand did have its blue lights on, but the vehicle involved in the crash, from what some witness reports said, did not have its blue lights activated. So our working theory was that Hailey did not recognize that the second vehicle was also an officer responding to a call.
The case was settled, never went to trial, correct?
It was resolved under confidentiality.
Now let's talk about the great Commonwealth of Massachusetts in terms of the challenges you face with cases like this, and let's talk about the issue of immunity and caps. Explain to our audience what caps are in place in cases like this, and so people understand, some of the difficulties in pursuing these cases.
Sure. Well, it kind of goes back to common law. Our law is based on sort of going back to the days of England for the most part, and the fundamental rule was you couldn't sue the king, and carrying that over, there's no there's no non-statutory right to sue the government. And so by statute, the statutes create the right, but the statutes also have caps on those rights. And so in Massachusetts, if you're suing a governmental entity, in general, the cap on the damages, all kinds of damages, is $100,000.
When you say all kinds of damages, you mean non-economic plus economic?
All of them. Yep, $100,000 is the cap, and there's no interest on that amount. There's no attorney's fees added on to that amount. It's just $100,000, and that's it.
Okay. Today we are very fortunate to have Hailey's mom here, Carrie Ann Estrella, And so we're going to bring her on right now. It is my great honor to introduce Carrie Ann Estrella. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
First of all, let me say this to you, my condolences on the passing of your daughter.
Thank you.
Tell our audience, go back to the time when you were initially informed of this. How were you informed?
I was called at 1 o'clock in the morning by my daughter's boyfriend. He said that Hailey had been in an accident, and he was at the police station, and they wouldn't give him any information, but then I needed to get to the hospital. So at that point, I got up. I thought I was dreaming. I went out to my driveway to look to see if her car was there. It wasn't. I grabbed my jacket and I got in my car and I started heading to the hospital. When I got to the bottom of my street, now I had no idea where the accident had occurred. I saw police, all over the place, and a pole had been hit down, and I remember saying to myself, oh, please, God, please tell me that she didn't hit that pole. And I stopped, and there was an officer directing traffic, and I said, my daughter's been in a car accident. This accident, where is she? And they said, get to the hospital. And I got to the hospital. When I got to the hospital, I went up to the desk, and I said, my daughter was just brought in here. She had a car accident, and they told me, have a seat. We'll figure out where she is. And at that point, I kind of blacked out a little bit, because being a healthcare provider, when they have you sit down, we're going to go get somebody to talk to you, it doesn't mean something's good coming.
And you are a registered nurse.
I am.
What happened after that?
My daughter's boyfriend had arrived. So I remember him being there with me, and I was by myself, and they brought me into a family room. Said, the doctor's going to come talk to you. And he came in and he said, she was gone. And I said, what are you talking about? I'm here to see my daughter, Hailey Allard. And he told me she was gone. And I don't remember much else after that besides being on the outside of the hospital and my brother coming towards me. And, he didn't know what was going on. And he was like, everything's going to be okay. And I just felt like I was in some kind of Twilight Zone dream that wasn't in my life. It wasn't really happening. And then the next thing I remember after that was being at home in my yard, surrounded by my friends and family and news people trying to, get their interview. But I was kind of it was almost like an out-of-body experience for me. As time has progressed, I have had flashbacks of different things that I remember that I didn't remember before. But that's basically, I do remember at the hospital asking to see her, and they told me no, that I couldn't see her. I kind of begged and pleaded, and one of nurses came out, someone I had known from high school, and I remember her grabbing me by the face and saying, Carrie, not like this. I said, okay. And I left. I'm sorry.
Fully understandable. When did you, obviously as a parent, you want to get to the bottom of what happened?
Absolutely.
What did you do next?
I actually was a little bit numb for quite some time. I'd say for a good few months after everything occurred. But, once I found out little pieces of what had happened, I was told, that she got into a car accident with a police officer, and that they were going in opposite directions, and that he was responding to a car break-in, a potential car break-in, as the second responder. So of course at that point I'm thinking to myself, okay, second responder, why was he going so fast? And then I came to find out that he had no sirens or blue lights on.
How'd you find that out?
I found that out through my attorney, because I wasn't told that. And once evidence was looked at, that's how that was presented to me.
Because your daughter was a good driver.
She was. I mean, she was a young driver.
Never had any major problems before that.
Totally. She's had a couple of fender benders, as young people do when they're driving, but nothing, major. She was a very good kid, and she always, followed the rules. And, I was a pretty strict, I don't say strict mother, but I expected what I expected, and she knew that. In fact, the night that this had happened, she had been working. That night, she was working at Charlton Memorial Hospital in their dietary. And her dad and I were going to Block Island in the morning. So after work, she was like, can I go to my boyfriend's house for a little while? And I was like, I think nothing good happens after midnight. I want you home by midnight. I'll be home by midnight. And we had actually had a conversation. And I said, drive carefully. Oh, come on, Mom. You know me, blah, blah, blah. So she went to her boyfriend's after work, and she was coming home because in the morning she was going to bring her brothers to daycare for me to camp, summer camp. So, she actually was she was my big help. Like, we grew up together. I had her when I was 18 years old. So she's a major part of who I am today. So the fact of her not being in my life anymore, I mean, she's still in my life, but not her physical being is, I can't even explain that feeling. But after I was angry, I will tell you, in the initial, like, why would, in my mind, why would a police officer be driving that fast as a second responder, especially at that hour and at this point, I didn't really know anything about the lights and the sirens. And then I found out more so that the officer did not even have his blue lights on or his sirens on. It was explained to me that typically, and this was by the district attorney's office, had explained to me that typically when an officer is responding to a crime scene or a potential crime, potential, break-in or whatever it may be, that they may turn off their sirens or their blue lights so that the suspect would not know they're coming up on him. And I understand that. But what I didn't understand is that this was the second police officer responding. And where he was responding to and where the accident occurred with my daughter, there was at least 2.5 miles. I'm not, don't quote me on that. He still could have had those blue lights on for some time before he had pulled up to that scene, because I do truly believe in my heart that had he had those blue lights on, I'm not even talking about the sirens, because I know it was midnight. It was about 12:30, and they don't do that not to disturb the neighbors, and I get that. But my thought is, if he had still had those blue lights on, and she was taking a left turn onto my street, they say she started to go into the lane, into his right of way. Well, as a driver myself, an experienced driver, if there's an oncoming vehicle with just headlights, I'm assuming this vehicle is doing 30 miles an hour. If I feel like I have time to turn, I'm going to turn. And I feel like she probably thought, okay, I see those lights, 100 feet away or 200 feet away, whatever it was, the headlights is just a normal car. Had he had those blue lights on, I truly believe that she would have stood put and this accident wouldn't have occurred. She would have known he was a police officer. Now, I don't believe she ever saw that first responder, because where she was coming from the highway, off the highway onto Route 103 where I live, he would have flown by her before she would have even got off the ramp. So she had no idea. So when she went to take that left, he's just another car with their headlights on. If those blue lights had been on, I myself would have shooken up and held on and been like, okay, what's going on here? And that to me is something that I feel like I have to go in my lifetime while I'm on this earth. I need to fix that for other people, because I've looked into policies, procedures, how police departments get accredited from the state of Massachusetts, and it's all very vague. You know, we want to have faith in our police department, in our state, that we're protecting our police officers as well as protecting our community. But all these policies that you're asking, that you're presenting, are vague. They're saying that, you know, a police officer who comes out of the academy and a police officer who's been on the force for 20 years have the same judgment. So yes, they do have guidance as how fast they should go, guidance, how fast they should go, when they should have their sirens on, when they should have their blue lights on. But it's guidance left to their judgment, which I would never want to pull away the judgment of a police officer who does hard work. And in this day and age, a lot of, you know, they're dealing with a lot. But as a town, as a state, we're assuming that everybody has the same judgment. So if we took that away and we said, let's talk about a doctor, for instance, we're going to say that a doctor coming out of medical school starting to practice and a doctor who's been practicing 20 years have the same judgment? No, that's not true. So these policies that Massachusetts is saying, I'll accreditate you, Somerset, Fall River, or whoever they are, I'll accreditate you. You're not being specific on how these policies should be laid out. And that is my goal, is to say, I don't, not me against the police or the police against me, because I have police officers that are friends of mine that I appreciate, and thank God for the police in this day and age. But we have to set a precedence and guidance for these young police officers coming on the force, as well as, you know, putting the faith back into the community to say, hey, my child is not going to be coming home from, you know, work and going to get hit over what, for my daughter, it was a car break-in. So to me, it didn't justify the speed that he was doing without sirens, without blue lights, being the second responder for a car break-in. Would I have felt any much better? Would I felt better if they said, well, somebody was, you know, life was at risk? But at least I would have known it happened. He was going fast to save another life. Not just because, you know, whatever reason, I don't know why he felt the need to go that quick.
What do you think about the work and the job that Claudine did for you?
You know, I think she did a lot of great, good work. She did the most that she could. Unfortunately, in this state, there are only certain things that you can do when you're when an accident like this, or a negligence, I'm going to say, because this was negligent, and I'll never deny that this was negligent. There's only so much you can go per law, what the law allows you to do. Nothing will ever bring my daughter back. Nothing. I need to do something to know that her life was taken accidentally in a terrible way, but that I'm moving forward as her mother, remembering her and bringing good out of this tragedy for not only the community, but for the police officers who also have a hard job. Like I said, I would never want to take their judgment call. They know what they're doing. They know what they're dealing with on an everyday basis. I feel like this could be something that we could do together. Me as a parent and as a community member, and them as the police officers and the chief of police, knowing what they deal with every day. So two sides coming together for the greater good of our community, of our state. I mean, I'm looking at this as a big picture. Yes, I'm starting here with Somerset, but I want to see this go through Massachusetts. I've looked in other states. Other states have guidelines that guide police officers to, okay, if you're going, and this is just an example, if you're going 30 miles over the speed limit, to a car break-in, you absolutely have to have your blue lights on. If you do not, that is negligent because you're putting the safety of the community as well as your own safety at risk. So my question is, why isn't this a nationwide? We're a nation, one nation. Why is this, and I understand we have different states, but why is this, some towns have it, some towns don't. And even in Massachusetts itself, Boston, they have guidelines on officers and blue lights and sirens and how they're responding. But Somerset doesn't, and Fall River doesn't. And so why we should, I hope to accomplish a generalized, even if it starts with Somerset, and then hopefully get it to the state, and then get together with other parents who've also been in this situation and work together for the greater good. That's basically how I feel.
Everyone recognizes, I think, that a police officer's job is extremely difficult, and they can get it from all sides, right? There's pressures to respond to a call quickly, and there's questions if they don't get there quickly enough. And so the guidelines or code of protocols or standards that Carrie Ann is pushing for is also hopefully will make an officer's job easier as well by establishing what are the limitations for response times in certain calls, like how fast can I push it for a lower priority call. And that ought to give the officers a level of comfort too, so that if they are questioned about their response times, they have something to rely on as well. We understand that it's a difficult job, and responding to shots fired or officer in trouble is a lot different from responding to cat in a tree, or maybe there's a vehicle break-in, and there should be something that police officers, particularly fairly inexperienced police officers, can rely on to help give them that guidance as to what is reasonable and appropriate for me in responding to these calls and different levels of calls.
Good advice. Good advice. I want to thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you.
In the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, you have this cap, as you mentioned, which caps damages at $100,000 when you sue a governmental agency. Now, that includes police and what else?
It includes every governmental agency, so housing authorities, police departments, DPWs, if it's the state or a city entity. Anyone, if you get into a car accident, if there's something that's done wrong by anybody in like cleaning a sidewalk, any governmental entity in Massachusetts is going to be subject to that $100,000 cap unless for some reason that particular entity has carved out its own statute, which generally that's been done away with in Massachusetts.
Because of the success of this case and other cases, you have a lot of people that contact your firm that want you to represent them. How do you select the individuals and the companies that you end up representing?
Well, we just want to make sure that the folks that we represent, we can actually make a real difference to. We aren't taking cases to get a piece of paper or to prove a point. We want to get the best net economic result for our clients as we can. Some people call us and they just have had terrible injuries or terrible circumstances, but maybe it wasn't anybody else's fault. Other people call us and they have terrible injuries, but maybe if there's an immunity or a liability or question we can't get over so that we cannot get them a net economic recovery, then we won't take that case. But in general, if we feel we can make a positive difference in this person's life, either through a workers' compensation claim, a Social Security disability claim, or a negligence-based personal injury claim, medical malpractice claim, then we're going to take the case.
I want to thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.